Hi everybody, welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. Earlier today I was on YouTube and there was a video that was recommended to me that was talking about the government shutdown. And it had to do with today, the day that I'm recording this, November 1st being the first day that certain benefits were not going to be paid out. And I got to thinking about it because I know that this shutdown has been going on for a while. And I wondered if like some of the other news was the fact that, this has broken a record. It turns out, so as of right now, this is Saturday night. We're almost at 32 days that the government has been shut down. The record, if we go to this Wikipedia article, it says that the record was 35 days. I'm trying to, where's the dates here? Well, it says it was under President Trump. So that one holds the record. So we would have to get, if I'm understanding the timeline correctly, we would have to get to Thursday of this coming week to break that record. Before Trump's presidency, it looks like the record holder was this one during the presidency of Bill Clinton at 21 days. And then after that, Barack Obama with a 16-day government shutdown. And I think that this is important to note as we consider the signs of the times and the second coming, because part of those signs are political instability. This is not good. There's been a lot of wild things happening both inside the United States and outside of the United States when it comes to politics and division, polarization, people from different parties and ideologies not being able to cooperate, find common ground, just becoming very bitter and very combative. And I'm not going to get into the politics of what's happening right now, but I feel like no matter which side you're on, you'd probably agree that something is broken right now. This is not good. It's not good that we're having the top two shutdowns happening so close to each other, right? So what I'm going to do is, if this ties or if it surpasses the last shutdown, I'm going to put it on this spreadsheet that I have called Signs United States. These are like US specific signs. And of course, I haven't captured everything, and maybe not everybody agrees on all this, but that's okay. I'm just trying to capture the things that stand out that I think that you could consider signs. So if this happens, it'll be my newest sign for the United States. There's a few things I wanted to point out here. And then after this, start looking at the bigger picture. The bigger picture being, if we were to go back to January 1st of this year, I think we would be able to honestly tell ourselves back then, you will not believe the state of affairs by the end of the year. I feel like that's actually an understatement. So many things that have happened this year, both in my personal life, but also in the church and in the world. I just cannot believe everything that we've seen this year. So, okay, as we're talking about political instability and a breakdown in communication, compromise, and as everything just becomes so much more divided, there's a few things I want to point out before we start talking about this year specifically. On this spreadsheet, if we go back to November 8th, 2022, I had noted that on that day we had the first ever in US history, the first ever election day blood moon lunar eclipse. Now, these were national elections, not for the presidency. That would come a couple years later, but it was for other offices in government. But this is the first time ever. And I pointed out that it's not too hard to see that that's probably not a good sign, having a blood moon on an election day. The next the next national elections that came up, like I just said, was 2 years later when we had the presidential election, in which President Trump was elected. And since that time, since he took office, there's been a lot of things going on. I feel like this eclipse was a foreshadowing of things to come, and we're watching it play out right now, including the government shutdown. There's been other things going on when it comes to division. Again, I'm not going to get into the specifics, but last year, May 31st, Trump became the first former U.S. president to be convicted of a crime. Interpret that how you will. Either way, for someone that was a former U.S. president at that time, that's not a good thing. We shouldn't want that for any former president of the United States. Whatever happened, it wasn't good, however you want to interpret that event. And then July 13th, there was an attempt on his life as he was at a speech. There was also, I thought I had it on here, there was also a second one, but the one that everybody remembers was the one that happened in July. So, just some very scary things going on right now inside the country. Let's go ahead and hop over to my spreadsheet called Timeline Second Coming. And let's go back to the beginning of the year. What I like to do on New Year's Eve is to do like a big review of everything that happened in the year. And I am going to be doing that this year. So I'm not going to cover everything that I have on here, but I just want to point out the more notable things, the things that I would be thinking about if we were to go back in time and tell ourselves on January 1st that you are not going to believe the state of affairs by the end of the year. These are the main things that I'm thinking about. So it seems like there was a little bit more foreshadowing, maybe of how this presidency was going to go or how things were going to go in the United States. Starting on January 6th, there was a rare snowstorm and snow emergency declared in Washington, D.C. on the day of election certification. So we had that. And then after that, the next day is the day that the Los Angeles wildfires began, starting with Pacific Palisades, which, by the way, has a large Jewish population, because there's been a lot of things going on in the Jewish world this year. And I feel like this was a foreshadowing of things to come. 7 days after that, of course, was President Nelson's 7-year anniversary as president of the church. So he made it to his 7-year anniversary. And then on January 20th, it was the coldest inauguration day in 40 years. We all know that 40 is a significant number in the scriptures. I'm not going to expound on that right now. So the inauguration was held indoors. So this presidency, and I'm not saying that this is like something against Trump, or let's just go neutral on this and just say this year, this presidency, no matter whose fault, whatever, whose fault it is, whatever happens, things started out literally very cold, right? And again, you could argue that's why this is happening, because people are not willing to compromise, or people are sticking to their guns, or however you want to characterize it. It's a cold moment where people are divided. Okay. After that, we had the passing of Pope Francis, which I felt like he still had time left. I would not have guessed that he would pass away this year. He passed away on April 21st, the day after Easter. And then in Israel, they experienced that nation's largest wildfire in history. It began on Israel's Memorial Day. And this was on the Hebrew calendar. Oh, sorry. It was Israel's Independence Day on the Hebrew calendar. And this year happened to be Israel's 77th birthday. Now, 7 is a special number to us in the church. It's a special number in the Bible. It's a special number to the Jews. So the fact that you had the largest wildfire in Israel's history happen as they were celebrating their 77th birthday, I'm going to go ahead and, just for myself, assume that that's a sign. I'm going to assume that that's a sign. There's more I could say about this. We have the concept of the curse of the 8th decade. Israel is currently in its 8th decade. There's basically the idea that there's no time in Jewish history where a united Israel lasted more than 8 decades. And so this is a critical time. And you've had several prime ministers of Israel talk about this. They really believe it. And I think there probably is something to it. Okay. Now this next one, I'm probably going to have to revise this a little bit, but in June, we had the beginning of the Los Angeles ICE protests and riots. According to the Wikipedia article, it only went from June till July. But I don't know, I feel like that's when things really started as far as like these protests go. But according to this article, the nationwide protest, according to them, it started, or according to this article, it started January 25th. So this is kind of an update for me, and I'll probably have to revise my timeline here. But this was a big event. This is more division. It's more instability as far as like contention goes between different parts of U.S. society. Okay, and then for me, this was just absolutely shocking. We had something called the 12-Day War. Up until this point, there had already been... I'm going to have to go back and remind myself. But since the start of the Hamas war, there had been one time, if I can find it, there was the first ever direct attack from Iran on Israel, April 13th of 2024. That involved ballistic missiles. And I think the one that I'm talking about this year, the 12-Day War, I believe that this was the second ever direct attack on Israel. And it was not just an attack or an operation or a skirmish. It ended up being called the 12-Day War. And it was this back and forth between Israel and Iran. It was mostly Israel bombing Iranian nuclear sites, and then Iran responding with mostly ballistic missiles. Like there may have been other types of missiles as well, like cruise missiles and drones. But it seemed like the main feature of the attack from Iran involved ballistic missiles. It didn't seem to do a whole lot of damage, but for this whole 12-day period, like every single day, the sirens were going off and people were having to go to their bunkers, and it was really hectic. One of the last milestones of that war was the United States conducted a bombing campaign on a key nuclear site called Fordow in Iran, and that involved the use of B-2 stealth bombers, which flew from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, right? Because that's where they're stationed, and I just think that's kind of interesting. Okay, and so we had the 12-Day War. It came and went, and there hasn't been much else between Israel and Iran since that time, but I have a feeling that story isn't over. Okay, and then in July, Utah experienced a tornado And not just any tornado, it was a fire-nado that was produced by the Deer Creek fire. And this tornado tied for first for strongest tornado ever recorded in Utah. And so if you take the two, I would probably put this one a little bit above the other tornado because this was not just a regular tornado. It was a fire-nado. Interesting year for this to happen. Well, a couple months later, President Nelson reached his 101st birthday. And on that same day, Israel struck Qatar. And this seems to have led to the end of the Israel-Hamas war. The ceasefire, I don't know if it's going to be permanent or not. I know that there's been some back and forth since that time. So right now it's unclear if that's going to hold. But they did at least reach that point, and it seems to have begun on President Nelson's 101st birthday. There was also an escalation between NATO and Russia because Poland became the first NATO member to fire a shot during this Ukraine war as Russian drones were entering its airspace. And then we have what happened the next day after President Nelson's birthday at Utah Valley University. Another sign of, I'd say, political instability, division, just really, really bad and shocking. I'm not sure that we've seen so much of this type of thing. I mean, there's been like an uptick in recent years, especially last year and this year, as far as like these type of events. Okay, well, that same day in Utah, there was an unusually deep earthquake, 68 kilometers, originating in Earth's mantle. So that doesn't typically happen. This was rare. It struck near Vernal, and it was on the same day as this other event. 3 days later, there was an unusual tornado in southeastern Utah, which ended up destroying multiple homes, but it was noted in the news that it was unusual. Okay, and then September 27th, President Nelson passed away. I would not have guessed that on January 1st of this year. Definitely not. I felt like he was going strong. And he was, he was looking very good for his age, I think. But, this day came. It was 7 days before General Conference. And it turns out that President Nelson served as president of the church for 7.7 years. And actually, it's more than just that. I did this calculation thing because my friend Jen with Christian Fire Poppy, she had noted, let's see, where did I think I have it at the end. I still haven't named it. She had noted that his presidency lasted 7 years. So I have all 7 years right here. And then 7 months in yellow is the 7 months. And then 7 weeks in this like pink color. And then she said 7 days. When I made my last video about this, I didn't know exactly how she arrived at 7 days because when I did this, it landed on October 9th. But she said that she went from the time of President Monson's passing, I think until President Nelson's passing. So I'll have to make another version of this because on this one I started on the first day of President Nelson's presidency. So I trust her. I'm still going to do it for myself just because I like to verify things. But even if we were just going off of this, it's still close enough. 7 years, 7 months, 7 weeks, 7 days. I mean, seriously. Okay. So he passed away and we miss him. He was an amazing president of the church and just an amazing man. And then we had this happen the next day in Michigan to our church. Another sign of instability. This one, maybe not political so much, but religious. people are just like losing their minds and just have become so vicious, you know? Um, all right. And so during General Conference, there was a 100-year storm in Utah, and that brought flooding to Salt Lake City, which is interesting because um, the two apostles that President Nelson and President Oaks filled in for when they passed away, they died exactly 1 year apart, January 11th of 1983, January 11th of 1984. In between that time, in 1983, there was the downtown Salt Lake flooding from the runoff from the snow in the mountains. And the flood got pretty close to Temple Square, but this was like a notable event that took place before they became apostles. And now, you have President Nelson who passed away, and before President Oaks became president of the church, you have this flooding event during General Conference in Salt Lake. Okay, President Nelson, his funeral was on October 7th, which was the 2-year anniversary of the Israel-Hamas war. I don't think that that's coincidence. And 3 days later, that's when they reached the ceasefire. That's how it played out. I'm actually going to skip to this one. So October 14th, President Oaks became president of the church. This was the 2-year anniversary of the Utah annular solar eclipse. I should put solar right here. Annular solar eclipse. This is the eclipse that went through Utah, and the path of annularity missed all the temples except for the Monticello, Utah temple. Interesting to note that both President Oaks and President Nelson became president of the church on the 14th of the month. For President Nelson, it was January. For President Oaks, it was October of this year. And then the same month that President Oaks became president of the church, I guess 14 days later, we have an update with Hurricane Melissa. So this is the strongest hurricane to have ever made landfall in the Atlantic. It broke records. We're starting to kind of see the aftermath of this event. This is from USA Today, an article by Janine Santucci. Hurricane Melissa death toll tops 60, quote unquote, apocalyptic Caribbean damage. So it doesn't seem like it seems like we still don't know the full aftermath of this event, but this is just a little update, but it seems like it was pretty bad. I'll remind you, it's interesting that in this last general conference, we had 2 speakers that grew up in Jamaica. And then we had a third one that's from the United States, but he grew up in the neighborhood of Jamaica in Queens, New York. The likelihood of that is not good. It really isn't. There's a lot of different people that can speak in general conference between all the general authorities and general officers of the church. For those 3 to have spoke in this general conference, I don't think that's very likely. Okay, and then on top of all that, we have this third interstellar object. The first one that we observed was Oumuamua in 2017, the year before President Nelson became president of the church. And now we have this one, which showed up this year, but just before President Oaks became president of the church. And it has all these very unusual characteristics and anomalies, and there's debate about what it actually is, if it's a comet, if it's a planetoid, if it's I already forgot the other name, but what is it? I think it was planetesimal, which is similar to a planetoid, but it's more like primeval, basically, not as developed as a planet. I'm not going to get into it, but we have this thing that, since I've started my channel, is the best candidate for the sign of the Son of Man. I hope that it is. but there's been very unusual things about it. So I think you'd agree that we could make that statement to ourselves on January 1st that you will not believe the state of affairs by the end of the year. And the thing is, the year's not even over yet. I'm recording this on November 1st. We still have 2 more months of this year. What else is going to happen? But if President Nelson's presidency is a guide, a lot of interesting things will happen during President Oak's first year. That's how it was with President Nelson. I can't count the number of times I've made a video talking about whatever, and then it'll just so happen that whatever the thing I'm talking about happened during his first year as president of the church. It's happened so many times. So I'll bet it's going to be the same with President Oaks. And already, that's not hard to believe because there's already been so many things in the lead up to his presidency and already just after becoming president of the church. Strange things are happening. Again, he is the judge, and he called President Christopherson to be his counselor, and he is also an attorney. So I guess it's not surprising that we see all this stuff going on in politics and society, with the government. So we probably better buckle up, make sure that you're prepared. I'm not one of these people that spread the doom and gloom and all that, but it would be wise to be prepared. Make sure you have food storage, make sure that you have extra money, make sure that you have cash on hand. I don't think, that you're going to be in dire straits, but you never know what's going to happen, whether it's a natural disaster or something economic or political. Just, it's a good idea to be prepared. But the Lord will take care of us. The more important thing is to live righteously. The Lord said that he will protect his people. Not meaning that all of us are going to completely escape. Every time we have disasters or wars, you're going to have members of the church that fall victim to those things. We're not immune, but the best policy is to live righteously, and then just do what you can to be temporarily prepared. Let's see, is that it? Yeah. Okay, that's gonna be it for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.